Good evening, Shortcuts. This is Stephen here. This is the first of two videos that I will record for a price list which will go out at 9 p.m. sharp on Wednesday night, Sydney time. That's the 21st of August. This list is kind of new wave, some Aussie, and just a general mix of just what I think are kind of interesting records, really. The second list will be audiophile and rarities. Okay, so here we go. The kickoff for this week. So for those of you who would like to receive the price list, you need to be on the mailing list and send me a note to Shortcuts Records. There you go, Shortcuts Records, aus@gmail.com. All right, let's get started. There were many ways that I could have started this, but I'm going to go with this as the kickoff record. This is the Talking Heads' second record. I think, quite amusingly titled, More Songs About Buildings and Food. It came hot on the heels of 77, the debut album, which of course featured Psycho Killer and some others. But I think this is a better record. In fact, I think, and you all know how big of a Talking Heads fan I am, but this is in the top 3 or 4 of their all-timers, I think. Fear Music, Remain in Light, Stop Making Sense, obviously, are awesome, but so is this. So why is this record so interesting? The back. Well, I think there's a little bit of context. So the Talking Heads were part of this New York scene that featured, I don't think that you can say that it featured a particular sound or a particular type of music. It wasn't like what was going on in London at the time, where it was, punk was going off, or it was more an ethos. And what you ended up with were a bunch of bands who played at similar clubs around New York City, like CBGB's and one or two others. And so you had Talking Heads, the Ramones, Television, Blondie, really being the I guess the foremost famous, but there were a bunch of others. CBGB's, of course, funnily being a country and bluegrass club that became something rather different. And awesome as Blondie and Ramones are in certain circumstances, I think the best singular album from that whole, I guess, period is Marquee Moon by Television. But the best band, I think, is unquestionably Talking Heads. Now, after both Ramones and Talking Heads released their debuts, they went on tour to the UK. And by all accounts, some of the Ramones, particularly Joey, hated it. There's an article on Pitchfork that talks about Joey Ramone referring to Stonehenge as a pile of stones, which I think is probably pretty solid. But they didn't love it, and they didn't love the music that the Talking Heads were playing on the tour bus, which often featured 70s tracks from the likes of James Brown and others. And so you can get this sense of this love of soul and funk from that period, particularly the mid-70s. And it wasn't too long before that translated into something completely new that they worked up, incorporating Afrobeat type instrumentation and percussion, which then became Fear of Light and Remain in Light, Fear of Music, some of the greatest music of the 80s. So, but they were on a journey with this record, particularly with the absolute stone cold classic that is Take Me to the River, the cover version that they did of the Al Green song. As soon as I say it, surely you can hear that incredible drum beat and the the loop, the kind of drop loop that they incorporate, and David Byrne's voice was changing quite a bit. In fact, this, when I think of television and Talking Heads, the only correlation I think is the voice, that kind of nasally arch tone of both Tom Verlaine and David Byrne, who of course shared an ego that was pretty legendary. But this record is so playful and so fun. Um, Stay Hungry, even the opening track, Thank You for Sending Me an Angel, which sounds somewhat cloying, is really not. It's a delight. Um, the girls want to be with the girls. This is almost disco in places, but not cheese. No cheese ball. This is driven, lean, and on some songs there's an absolute absence of a chorus that is just a groove. And yeah, it's so lean. I love it. It's a great record. If you don't have a copy, this is a really nice copy. This is an Aussie first press from my own shelf. There's the sleeve. It's really, really good nick. And yeah, lovely, lovely record. Talking about records that sound really good, this is almost a cliche now, but we have to recognize there were some records from the 80s that sound almost miraculously good for reasons that are kind of hard to fathom. One of them is Tracy Chapman's debut album. The other is this, The Traveling Wilburys, Volume 1. One of the first albums I ever bought. I bought this on vinyl back in the day. And my mum had bought me, and my dad, but I think probably my mum, had bought me this little sound system for Christmas. And I had a CD player and a double cassette deck. But what fascinated me most was at the top there was a record player. And I bought Tears for Fears, The Wonder Stuff, Prefab Sprout. These were the records that were on my radar, and I loved them. I played them all the time. I thought it sounded better even at that time, and I still remember it. And I kept them, and they're in pristine condition in my mum's house in Ireland. But this one was one of the ones that I bought as well. So many of us did off the back of that Handle with Care hit single. And I think particularly of the Roy Orbison voice, the Roy Orbison verse. Roy Orbison then, of course, passed away shortly after this record was made and was missing from Volume 3, the amusingly titled second record from the Traveling Wilburys. And I think he was a big miss. For those of you who aren't aware, the Traveling Wilburys were, I think, the ultimate supergroup. You had Roy Orbison, Jeff Lynne, who did a lot of the production, which is why this does sound very ELO-ish. Tom Petty, my personal favourite member. You had George Harrison, and of course, Bob Dylan, who was on a bit of a career renaissance at the time. But this record really worked. Produced by Otis and Nelson Wilbury. They all took a name. Now, this is a pretty much near mint condition UK first press. And it is in, I'm telling you, immaculate condition. You will never find a better copy. Same as the one I have on my own shelf. Anyway, The Traveling Wilburys. My favourite song on The Traveling Wilburys, I think, is the Dylan track. It always makes me smile. Tweeter and the Monkey Man. Now, I have a little bit of a Midnight Oil showcase here. So these records are now getting increasingly hard to find. And whilst these copies are not in absolutely pristine condition, they're pretty damn good. all first presses. And I wanted to show, I'm going to start off, actually, no, I'm going to start off with this one, even though Blue Sky Mining is my personal favorite. I'm going to start here. Diesel and Dust. Now, part of why I wanted to show you this is, can you see this? This comes with this particular copy. And whoever it was must have cut this out of a magazine. Whoever the owner was, and I have no idea who it is, cut this out of the magazine because this is the deserted house that was on the sleeve of Diesel and Dust, their global breakthrough record. And this little cutout, I'll just read what it says. The South Australian countryside is littered with deceased farmhouses. This one remains resolutely alone. Where are the people now? Now, this very much looks to me like it is the same deceased house that's on the cover. You can see the similarities. And anyway, whoever it was who bought this back in the day thought the same thing. You know, Diesel and Dust, first press, genuine, obvious classic. But this one is getting very hard to find, particularly the kind of deep blue sleeve. This is Blue Sky Mining. This was a real formative record for me. I was a huge Midnight Oil fan growing up in Dungannon and County Tyrone. And I made Gene Stewart, who ran the local country music shop, order me this on cassette. That's how I first owned it. And I thought and still think that I loved every track, every single one. Every one had a chorus or a bridge or something that I felt I could sing along to. And it had an atmosphere and it was a compelling listen, like Stars of Warburton, Forgotten Years, blistering guitar solos, the rhythm section on this song, on this whole record, absolutely unbelievable. Even when you would have, you know, kind of slower tracks like River Runs Red. River Runs Red is a very kind of languorous track until it just breaks out with this crazy kind of drum roll, and the whole way through, I just loved it. And I had no idea what these were. I hadn't a clue that these were kind of wind farms and the cracked earth. But I love and still love this record to death, and it's just hard to find. Now, I paid quite a lot for this collection, so these aren't super cheap. I'm actually going to pass them on at what I paid. But I think they're just, you know, and again, they're not pristine copies, but they're really good. And probably the third great, truly great, you know, and maybe, I mean, arguably got the highest highs with Only the Strong and some of the others on it. But it's a great record, 10-1. And then finally, one of my favourite of their EPs, which is Armistice Day. So a lovely little selection of Midnight Oil's accomplishments. One of the, you know, I know that they've been celebrated. They've done some tours, and we've lost one of their core members, but they're a truly great band. All right, I've got a few more. I'm just going to kind of flick through at a reasonable clip because there's just kind of interesting records that I like, and I don't know, maybe I mean, so I'm just going to talk about this record very briefly. This is the Stranglers, all live on All of the Night. This is their second live album after the Excerpt live album. But I actually prefer this one. No More Heroes, Down in the Sewer, Golden Brown, that's just track one. And it gets more and more sleazy and debauched as it goes. And I think that was what was great about particularly early 80s Stranglers. Incredible bass lines, sleazy sound, God, grimy and grungy, and Hugh Cornwell's voice was just, you know, just a cool band. And these records aren't expensive, but they're really, really good. Okay, This is a little. I didn't realize I had a duplicate of this until I was kind of flicking through the shelves the other night, and I realized I got two of these. So there was a series of 60s psych and psychedelic compilations that were compiled out of Germany in the 80s on this label way back. And what they did, look how psychedelic that is. They curated a bunch of tracks from pretty much unknown 60s psychedelia and psych rock bands, and then compiled them into these records. There were four or five of them. This one's the second. It's called The Barn. Well, they put these great covers. So look at that. There's a sleeve. 60s Rebellion. And so on this record, you've got the likes of the Destiny's Children. You're not going to know who these are. The Destiny's Children, Big Sound, the Buccaneers, the Actioneers, the Celtics, the Human Situation. But what you get, scuzzy guitar, amped up vocals, typically female. It's really fun. And yeah, if you ever see those compilations on this, they were actually compiled and pressed in Germany, so that the vinyl is actually really, really nice. All right, for something completely different, I mentioned the Ramones and Talking Heads earlier as kind of quintessential New York bands. Well, off the back of what was called the new wave of British heavy metal, which kind of started in, I guess it was probably the early 80s, and kind of key bands like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, etc., really just kind of smashed it and became really big globally, particularly in the US. And there were a slew of bands that came off the back of that, particularly out of New York. And one of them was this band here. This is I think their second record, The Rods. This is the little sleeve that came with it. Heavy metal is here. New albums from three of the best. Tanks, Filth Hounds of Hades, Motorhead's Iron Fist, and the Rods debut. You can see they were there. And the original, you got these patches. Unfortunately, this copy doesn't have the patch, but it has this, which is pretty cool. I think this is the Aussie first press. Yeah, it is. It's the Aussie first press. Now, the Rods came out in New York, and they were probably one of the better mixes of that riffy new wave of British heavy metal sound, mixed with more contemporary American hard rock. So you get harmonies on the vocals, but you still get searing guitar solos. The Rods released an album recently. I mean, they've been going for donkeys now. But it's a really fun record, and one that's a little bit lost to time, but I like it a lot. Not as much as this next one, though. Cupid and Psyche 85 by Scritti Politti. Scritti Politti, this was their, I don't know, second or third album, but this was the first to embrace electronica and sampling. Green Gartside was their lead singer and kind of main guy. Really interesting dude. Very well educated. Was 6'6", but sings with the voice of in some like almost this very preening, high pitched voice, but these incredibly intricate electronic backings. And these songs, this album produced quite a few hits in the UK. The Word Girl, Flesh and Blood, which is interesting to listen to now because it is somewhat of a feminist treatise. It talks about how being a girl was somehow a position of denigration and not quite held the status it should be. It's really interesting. Hypnotize and Absolute being the hit that I remember. So Green Gartside was absolutely, completely scared stiff of playing live, had debilitating stage fright to the point when he was in his early 20s, he had a heart attack. And after this record became somewhat of a recluse, but has come back out of his shell and still and plays live now. But this is a really intricate, melodic, really cool record. One of the best electropop records for sure of the 80s. Now this one was more kind of soft rock. So this was the Arson Parsons Project's biggest hit since I, Robot in the 70s. And Eye in the Sky was the first of their albums that they recorded on analog equipment but mixed digitally. And I'm kind of proud to talk about it. This album, retrospectively, I think it was like, I don't know, 2019 or something. The Grammys have got all of these weird, obscure Grammys that you can win. But this ended up winning a Grammy for its recording and its immersive experience. And it is really interesting record. It is super well produced. Man, it is like a warm, enveloping sound coming out of the speakers. But it is a little bit soft rock and a bit yacht rocky. But yeah, kind of likable and very 80s, very quirky. Now, this is not 80s, this is 70s. The London Chuck Berry sessions. All of these London sessions coming off the back of the Howling Wolf going to London and writing and creating this great record with a bunch of musicians. But this one has a couple of the guys from The Faces and then this incredibly controversial 11-minute song played live on the back half called My Dingaling, which was edited down to 4 minutes and became a big hit in the UK, somewhat inexplicably, but it is fun. All right. The Black Sabbath series of records from their self-titled all the way through to Technical Ecstasy, one of the greatest run of records of all time. And this is the double album compilation that pulled those 5 records together. We sold our soul for rock and roll on the Vertigo label. Now, I have no idea what they were thinking about with this particular centerfold, but that's fine. They can get away with it, especially when just side one of record 1. This is a double LP. Black Sabbath, The Wizard, Warning. Side 2, Paranoid, War Pigs, Iron Man, and Wicked World. Even to side 4, Sabbath Police, Sabbath, Am I Going Insane, Snowblind, and NIB. It's just classic after classic. These compilations aren't that easy to find, but they're actually really, really good. And this is a really nice copy. And then just a couple of quick ones to go. This is Lou Reed's debut solo album after 5 legendary years with the Velvet Underground, who were way before becoming that cult commercial band that they eventually became. At this time, it was kind of amazing that Lou Reed even got a solo record contract, but he dusted off 10 or so tracks from the Velvet Underground days and recorded them, and that's the reason why I really like it. I really like it because it sounds like a Velvet Underground record. And I've got a couple of compilations to go, just because they're too quirky, weird, kind of 80s. I don't know whether they're 80s. Anyway, oh no, this one, this I'm not quite sure what year these come out, but you'll understand what I mean. This is rather odd, and rare and kind of pretty compilation of Jethro Tull. Now it's got like a textured sleeve, and it has 9 songs from their first series. I guess now it can be recognized as cult records. This is really not easy to find, and it sounds really nice. And then finally, this album has such a beautiful sleeve and such a pretty idea that it somewhat gets lost, but it's actually really nice. The Beatles ballads, it's just such a nice record to stick on. this is not expensive. I'm putting it in because I like it. And so therefore, it made the list. So there you have it. I told you that was a quirky and weird list. I hope you found something of interest. If you would like to be on the price list that will go out, or the email with the prices that will go out at 9 p.m. sharp on Wednesday, Sydney time, drop me a note, shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. Thank you.